in eastern Iowa where I grew up. I grew up just south of here in Columbus Junction, and I will tell you what you heard Kevin Kenny's talking about. This is an opportunity for us right now to stop the insanity of talking about the urban-rural divide and start talking about our shared values in this state. People like my parents and grandparents in southeast Iowa and rural communities in and around Louisa County, and my constituents in Pleasant Hill and East Des Moines care about shared Iowa values, an education system that we can be proud of, being able to recruit quality teachers into our classrooms for the next generation, investing in a skilled workforce instead of corporate coupons and giveaways, making sure we have infrastructure improvements in our communities for long-term economic development, protecting and promoting our natural resources so we have quality resources for the next generation, and preserve the future of agriculture with getting rid of topsoil runoff. I mean, those are things that are shared values. And they're at stake in this election. As we look at the things that threaten the future of our state, as we look at what Iowa's future should be in 20 years, those are the things that are going to be mattering most to Iowans. When we talk about climate change, we talk about economic opportunity for our state with wind power and solar panel development here in Iowa, quality jobs as well as ensuring our long-term future. Those are the things that are going to be at stake right now. I'm proud of the things that we saw this last session from Democrats across the state. We saw Iowans standing up to some of the most hurtful legislative policies that we've seen in generations. We saw Governor Branstad and at that time Lieutenant Governor Reynolds push through a legislative agenda that only held back and took away from our quality of life in this state. Think about the opportunity they had. They had full control of state government. They had an opportunity to do some really positive things for our state, to really cement a great legacy for Iowa. But what did we see instead play out this last year? We saw them push through a collective bargaining bill that told every person who answers the sacred call of public service in our state that they're entitled to lesser and fewer rights in the workplace because they answer that call of public service. We're talking about our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, our public hospital nurses, our social workers, our road workers that will keep us safe tonight. Those are the people we're talking about. When we talk about education, something that for generations has defined Iowa, having some of the best schools in the world as our public schools in rural and urban communities in this state. We've seen them underfund our schools for now 7 consecutive years in a state that values education. We talk about higher education. We've seen cuts to our state universities. We've seen attacks on our independent colleges. We've seen attacks on our community colleges. One of the greatest things about being an Iowan is the things that I was able to do that Amy was talking about earlier. Representative Nielsen was talking about how I grew up in rural Iowa, went through a rural public education, went on to an Iowa college and an Iowa law school to become a workers' rights attorney. I was able to become what I wanted to be when I grew up because of a quality public education system that allowed me to pursue my educational opportunities start to finish. And we should be doing that for every student in the state, where they go into a profession that is in the building and construction trades with skilled apprenticeship programs or community colleges. That's the promise of Iowa's education system. Yet again, it was attacked last session, and we can't forget. Don't get outrage fatigue, because we've got a legislative session coming up January 8th. And what are the things they're talking about as the next steps right now? They're talking about further blowing up our state's budget. They're talking about education savings accounts that will distract dollars from our public school systems that are already strapped for resources. They're going to preserve their corporate coupons, now almost $600 million a year missing in our state budget. And as a result, we're going to go back to the legislature and likely cut from critical services across this state to pay for it. Right now, we've lost 1,300 field staff in the Department of Human Services since Branstad and Reynolds took office. Think about that. Think about who is being lost in our communities, our children who are at risk, to preserve millions of dollars to give away to some of the wealthiest corporations on the planet. Think about the missing resources in our towns. Just this summer, after all the budget nightmares that we went through this past year, Governor Reynolds pushed through $20 million in new state coupons for Apple, the wealthiest corporation on the planet. And within that same 10-day period, announced that we are not going to be able to have the state ombudsman respond to nursing home complaints. Think about those two things. They're connected. They're connected. They're connected when we talk about a 17-year low in unemployment and budget cuts and raiding rainy day funds. Think about those two things. If you're a fiscal conservative, you cannot support what this administration is doing. So I'm telling you, we can't get outrage fatigue. As we see this legislative session coming up, and they talk about distracting more dollars away from our schools, they attack public employees by threatening to raid the security of IPERS for hundreds of thousands of Iowans. As they look through an agenda that will further worsen our budget problems in this state, as they look to an agenda that will cause more division, take more away from working families, we have to stand up to it. We need to. And we saw it from so many Democrats across the state. We saw thousands of people come to the Capitol. We saw hundreds go to forum after forum last year. You cannot get outrage fatigue. Don't slow down. You've got to keep standing up, because that's how we make a difference. I was proud to stand up with Senator Boulton and Senator Kinney on that public sector bargaining bill when we debated all through the night. 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Standing up for Iowans who needed to see that we weren't giving up on them. We need to do that again in this legislative session. And when we talk about the 2018 election, we're talking about a fight for the soul of our state. I say it every time I speak to a group of people. This will define what Iowa looks like for the next generation. And when we talk about the things that matter most to Iowans, we are going to be proud of all the fights that we took on this past year and this coming legislative session ahead. But if we're going to win this fight for the soul of our state, we have to do more than just talk about what we are against. We have to talk about that vision forward. Think about what Iowa looks like if we do fully fund our schools, if we do treat teachers like professionals that they are, so we can recruit the next generation of quality teachers into our classroom, if we do invest in wind and solar technology and build our economy the responsible way, if we take $20 million instead of giving it to Apple, we invest in 266 Main Street Iowa grants and rebuild our communities in rural and mid-sized communities across our state. If we embrace the diversity that makes our state strong. My hometown of Columbus Junction has a vibrant Main Street because of the immigrant community that came together to open up shops and businesses. We can do these things and make an Iowa that we are so proud to call home if we do it. So that's what this election is about. And the time for action is now. We need you. We need you to join this campaign. I'm proud to be supported not only by 22 of my legislative colleagues, but also by labor unions representing over 100,000 Iowans. Thank you. I'm proud to be supported by 13,000 Iowans who have already committed themselves to supporting us in this election. I'm proud to be supported by so many Iowans who have contributed to this campaign. As Senator Boulton said, we're gonna need every resource we can to win this fight for the soul of our state, and I appreciate your help in doing that too. We've got some opportunities coming up. We're going to have an event January 3rd in Coralville that Representative Nielsen is helping to put together. So recruit your friends and neighbors to come out and help us organize our support. We've got an important Iowa caucus coming up. February 5th is the Iowa caucus for the gubernatorial race. We need you to stand up and support us in our agenda there as well. We've got a huge primary election and a huge general election coming up too. So we need you to sign on board. We're building the movement that we need to win this fight for the soul of our state, and we'd love to have you. And I'm happy to take questions if people have those.
On February 5th, what's going to happen, and why should people go to the caucus, and what would people do at the caucus to help you?
Right, so many of you are familiar with the presidential caucuses, right? You show up and you divide in your preference groups. February 5th, we're going to have the off-year caucuses, or off-presidential caucuses here. It's going to be important because we have 7 Democrats running, and there is a chance that if I don't get 35% of the vote, this thing goes to a convention. And who wins those caucuses will be critically important to who will be voting at that state convention to determine the Democratic candidate for governor. So that is the first step in this process, and we need everyone to show up and participate at that level because it is going to be an important part of shaping our party for the future as well. So it's very similar to the presidential caucus that you